All right, so we're on Monday, October 23rd. We're going to talk about more about types of economies and some current economic arguments. And then we're going to kind of reflect on the first week and hopefully what we learned and what it's going to take to do well moving forward in economics class. All right, so today we're kind of going to look at some the socialism, communism, capitalism, that sort of thing. So you got, Bernie Sanders famously is defending democratic socialism, and there's several others in Congress now who talk about that. And then got Haggard here. I don't know what Haggard has to do with it, but the problem with capitalism it distributes its riches unequally. The problem with socialism is it distributes its miseries equally. So there's a little bit of there's some pros and cons certainly, and we're going to kind of look at the sort of positives and negatives and how it's played out historically. All right, so I will have my target time, my Zoom room open on Tuesday, Thursday for you guys from 11 to 11:45. You need to meet some other time to talk through some stuff. I certainly will do that. Um, so when you take your quizzes for this class, I have been sending people significant feedback. I set them the quizzes for two times to take it originally. Okay, so what I would be doing if I was you is waiting until I give you the feedback on it, seeing what you need to look back over, study, think through how you want to answer something, then take your second take of the quiz. Um, and then you can learn from your errors, do better the second time. Um, Two, I do have it where it's not going to show you what let you look back over the quiz because I will give you some feedback of what to look at, but you've got to be preparing beforehand, paying very close attention to all the live lessons and the tutorials that I assign and any videos that I assign. So I think a lot of people recognize that the expectation of work in this class is higher than the government class was. I didn't mess with what was going on there at the end when I took that one over. However, I am going to say that this what I'm expecting of you is high school level work. And if you think about your parent or whoever turns in your attendance for the week says that you're spending 30 to 35 hours a week on schoolwork, and um, given that you have two maybe three core classes, that means you should be spending probably 10 hours a week or more on this class. So if you think about it, I'm not expecting way too much. Okay. So just be keeping track of my communication with you, and then I'm going to send out grade updates and missing work today at some point. I've got several people who turned in their quiz from last week yesterday, so I'm going to be grading those and then sending out grade updates and what's missing today also. So if you got a quiz that you've already taken and you need to do your second take, if you're planning on doing that day, maybe send me a message real quick and saying, "Hey, wait to text my parents until I do my second take of that or something like that." Yeah, please let me know that. Okay. So yeah, make sure you're checking your Canvas grade book. I try to get them updated as quickly as I can. Also, you need to make sure that you notice that on things like the Ed Minimum tutorial, there are several people who apparently got used to in other classes not actually doing the tutorial and just skipping through it. If you will notice in the Canvas gradebook, I put on there a separate grade for actually doing the work. Okay. So if you find that you have a section that says something like showing work in tutorial or something like that, and you don't have full points, you need to go back and do that because your grade can't afford for you to throw away basically free points for doing the work. Okay. So you need to make sure that you are looking at your grade book carefully, and all of the daily grade type work, whether it's an ed puzzle or that little intro to economics video or your mastery quiz or your work for the tutorial, man, you need to get 100 on those things. Okay. The assessments are going to be tougher. So you need to be putting in the work on the daily work to make an excellent grade. And if you put in that work, you probably will see better assessment grades also. Okay. So that's the way it's designed. And you just got to rise up to that. And again, what I'm expecting of you is high school level work that's preparing you for college or career to put in the work you need to do to be excellent. Okay. All right, so this week we're going to continue to use evidence to explain how various economic systems address the basic economic questions regarding distribution of resources. That might sound confusing now, but it won't be. And then investigate some contemporary economic policies, analyze how political ideologies influence their implementation, and provide justification for or against regulation in a free enterprise or market economy system. These little numbers right here tell you which South Carolina standards I'm working on. All right. So what I'm asking you to do is certainly what the standards are asking you to do. All right. So today, in plain English, what we're doing is recognizing and describing different economic theories and thinkers through history, and why the United States moved more from a market economy to more of a mixed economy. Hopefully, that will help you understand that. All right. This week, I do want to point out to you that I put 2 Edmentum tutorials and mastery quizzes this week. Okay. I didn't put anything else. Okay. Because I know that that's a decent amount to do 2 of those. So if you'll notice here, the tutorial and spending the time answering the questions, all that, that's 25 points each right there. Okay. The mastery quiz is 25 points each. So if you go through and skip through it, okay, well, you might have a 50 for the week on that, but you're not going to get these points right here. So 2, once you've done the tutorial, if you need to go back and do the mastery quiz again, just communicate with me and say, hey, I need to go back and do that. Did you notice I already did the tutorial? At that point, it would be okay for you just to kind of go through the slides again quickly and look for what you missed. But you need to make sure that I've seen that you've done the tutorial first. And again, if you had the one from last week and you didn't have all the points for doing the tutorial part, make sure you go back and get those points because you need those points, right? I did post the guided notes. I don't make you do the guided notes, but they may help you if you have those down, like when you get to the quizzes for the week. So yeah. All right, y'all let me know in chat if you got any questions about what I'm saying so far here before I get into the content for today. And I think that y'all will recognize that what I'm going to emphasize here in live lesson is going to be taking the content from the modules and seeing what more explanation is needed or helping you to interpret a little bit more. That's why you need to watch the live lesson. Okay. All right. So here we are. We're going to talk about some economic theory people first of all right, from history. So the first one, and this is a really goofy looking picture, is a dude named Adam Smith. He's kind of the classic economic theory guy. And so he was in the 1700s. He was in Scotland, right, in then Great Britain, and he's considered the father of modern economics. He was advocate of what's called laissez-faire policies, which kind of just means hands off, back off, let it happen what happens, right? He was the author of a book called The Wealth of Nations and created the concept of GDP, or gross domestic product, the idea of calculating the total value of goods and services produced by an economy. Now, in his time period, one of the things he was up against, or he was complaining about, was a system called mercantilism, which was government involvement with trade and controlling trade with their colonies. So this would have related to the American colonies of Britain at that time. But in general, he was trying to. We don't necessarily have to learn a lot about mercantilism in this class. But what I want you to see is that he was against government involvement in the economy. He wanted the hands-off approach and to let the market play out the way it would. All right, that's what I want you to know. All right, so here's the kind of picture, or the way people understand Adam Smith, and I do have Adam Smith on the quiz on this Friday. All right, so he believed in what's called the invisible hand theory. It's kind of like that kind of like a puppet master or whatever, but there's like behind the scenes controlling what's happening with the economy. So hands off, but there's like the market is controlled by these things, right? So one, profit seeking producers will make more. So in other words, if you can make more money, you're going to make more money. Makes sense, right? the needs of society are automatically met. That one's a little bit more questionable, but the idea is that the market producers are going to, if people see there's a need and they can make money doing this, they're going to do that, right? Which then make sure that there's enough there for people to have what they need. Government does not get involved in his theory of economics, right? It's backing off, making sure that property is protected, and that's about it. Competition keeps the quality high. In other words, if you got say you live in a small town and there's a pizza restaurant, right? And then another pizza restaurant comes along, then the first one has to do better to keep its business, right? That kind of thing. And then the competition also keeps prices low for that reason, is if you charge too much, the other guy might charge less and people will go to them instead. And then competition and self-interest, meaning you acting for your own profit, acts as an invisible hand that regulates the free market, meaning, yeah, people do act selfishly and try to make money, but that actually benefits the most people when people act for profit, just indirectly. Okay. So people starting businesses, making better products so people will buy them, does allow for there being more stuff out there, better products available for cheaper. Right. And there's a lot to this. Okay. In terms of, it does make a lot of sense. Right. And that's generally the way our economy works. Are there some problems with that? Yes. And we'll get into some of those, but that's generally the theory behind a capitalist market economy. Right. All right, the other side of this is going to be Karl Marx, right? Marxist theory, communism. So the context he was writing in, and I do want to be pretty fair with the kind of feedback and criticism he was having. So he and a guy named Frederick Engels were German guys, but they were studying the Industrial Revolution in England because it industrialized first. And they were noticing the kind of corruption that was happening with the early industrializing economy, with the child labor and working people to death, and like hours and hours for not that much money. So he publishes a book called the Communist Manifesto in 1848. And basically he was using what's called the labor theory of value to explain the difference in market prices, and is challenging the kind of capitalist view of Adam Smith with a book called Das Kapital. Right. And historical materialism would be what you would call his theory. So basically the idea that all of history is a history of class struggle and control of money and resources. Right. And he explains everything in history that way. So Marxism, this ideology, is a social, political, and economic philosophy named after Marx. It examines the effect of capitalism on labor, productivity, and economic development. And so basically argues with how that's a negative thing that's eventually going to push the workers over the edge, where they're going to have a revolution to overturn capitalism in favor of communism. Okay. That process looks something like this. The capitalists, which he calls the bourgeoisie, exploit or enslave or control the workers, which he calls the proletariat, which leads to an imbalance of power. The people who control the money, the resources, they have power. Class conflict means between the rich and the poor, and that gap is growing, which he then thinks will lead to an economic and social revolution where the proletariat, the workers, overthrow the bourgeoisie, the business owners, and seize control of the means of production, like how things are produced and so forth. Right. So the next stage here is going to be called, he's eventually thinking they're going to get to socialism and then to communism. So basically changing the way things are owned from being, owned individually to owned by the whole state, the whole people as a whole. All right. So that's Marxism in a nutshell. All right. Now, a way of thinking about this, because I think that's a lot of hard theory, is to use cows. And there's a lot of other illustrations on this for different types of capitalism, but here's the basic idea. Under capitalism, you own two cows. Okay. You sell one and buy a bull. Right. So then your bull and your cow, you got more cows. You sell the cows and you make money, and then you retire. Right. So the idea is you can use your cows. You own both of them. You can do what you want to with them. Okay. That's capitalism. All right. Now, socialism is you have two cows and it says you give one to your neighbor, but then under socialist theory that the government's forcing you one to give one to your neighbor. So you still own a cow, but now your neighbor has a cow too. So it's distributing the resources equally. That's why it's kind of a compelling theory to people, unless you're the guy who owned the two cows to begin with, in which case you're not too happy with the cow being given to somebody else. Right now, communism is like socialism has gone off the cliff kind of thing, where you had two cows. Here's communism. So the government, the state, not like South Carolina, the state here means the government, takes both of your cows and gives you some milk. So you don't own anything, right? So maybe you're having to still milk the cows, but the government owns the cows, that kind of thing. Okay. So this is oversimplified, but this is basically the way people understand these terms pretty much in the contemporary, like now kind of time. All right. So that's capitalism, socialism, communism. All right. All right. Now I want to give you this theory right here to help you understand another sort of idea here. So this is the theory of equality of opportunity versus the equality of result. I actually should have that written on here, and I don't. Let me go back here. So this is equality of opportunity versus result. Okay. This is the wording I need you to think about here. Okay. And it's related to capitalism and socialism, but it's kind of takes it in a different light, and it helps you to understand why socialist theory is something people will argue for. So let's take a baseball game here, right? A lot of people in this class are baseball players, so this works pretty well. So you got three dudes right here who are wanting to watch a baseball game, okay? So this tall dude right here, he can already see the baseball game, but he's got a box to stand on. This guy, he needs the box, but then he can see. And then a little guy, he's got a box too, but he still can't see. So what we would say here is that all of them have an equal opportunity, right? Each person has one box. Well, that's fair, right? Well, or is it, because now this guy didn't need a box to see, and this guy still can't see, right? So basically, this would be capitalism, where there's equality of opportunity. Okay, so equality of opportunity is here. Okay. Everybody had an equal opportunity. Everybody got a box. So it's kind of like we think of with, like, say, public education. Everybody has an equal opportunity education. That's fair. If they don't do something with it, so be it. Okay. But does everybody really have an equal opportunity? Well, not all schools are the same. Not all kids have parental support at home and so forth and so on. So then they're still behind. Okay. So equal opportunity says we all could do something, right? You could go make millions of dollars someday. You could, but some people start out ahead of others based on their background and how many barriers there are to them to succeed. So that's where the theory would be, okay, is that actually really equal opportunity? I mean, it says it is, but is it really? So then that's more of a capitalist mindset, right? Everybody's got an equal opportunity to achieve the American dream and to choose their job, make money, so forth. Okay. Now, on this theory right here, this is more of a socialist theory, because the idea is this guy's tall enough to begin with. He has what he needs. So we'll take the extra that he doesn't need and give it to this guy over here. So this we would call, all right, the equality of result, or the equality of outcome. Okay. Making sure everybody can see the game. Right. So the theory behind the second one is that there are some barriers that are making it where some people can't succeed, that may or may not be their fault. And certainly if they're not their fault, then we feel bad about it and we want to make that right. Okay. So there's a certain idea of justice where you feel like that this is not just, so we need to move this over here. Right. That's more of a socialist idea, though, but you can see how, using this picture right here, how that would make some sense to people, right? Which is, this guy can see the game, and now we take his box and give it to this guy, he can see the game. So it's kind of, take it in terms of business and income, higher taxes to provide for the poor, right? So that they have what they need. That's kind of the theory behind equality of opportunity or result. And equal opportunity, that's a very capitalist idea, market economy, and socialism, very much the equality of result or outcome. All right. Now, in theory, that sounds, not that bad and fairly interesting. But I will point out to you, I think there's some significant problems with that. Okay. Which I'm about to tell you. It's like this. Right. So think about these boxes here, and let's say talk about business and people producing more, and your country having better production and a growing economy and everything else. Okay. So we'll give you this kind of example right here as to why the socialist theory, kind of related by that second one, might have a negative effect on incentive. In fact, probably does. Okay, so let's take an example of grades in a class. Okay, so let's say that we got a great student who works really hard to earn a 98 average. Well, another student doesn't work hard and they earn a 72. But in reality, the first student really only needs a 90 to have an A. So let's take the A points from the student who has the A plus and give him the person that has a 72. So then they can have a B also. So let's say we do that with all the kids in the class. All the kids that have A's, we take their extra points, right? They're at 98, 99, 100. Take those extra ones, drop them down to a 90, and give them to the kids who have lower grades. Maybe some of them were working hard and C was their best. Maybe some of them were just failing because they weren't trying. But now everybody can have at least a B, right? Sounds good, right? Now everybody has equal result. But here's the problem with this. The good students, the really good ones that made the 98, 99, and 100, are they going to work as hard now if this is the way a class works? If you worked really hard, made 99 and 100, and then I took your points and I gave them to somebody who didn't work hard, how would you feel about that? Well, you would be mad as heck, right? As you should be, because you wouldn't benefit from working harder. You work harder and somebody else benefits who may not be working as hard. So then what's going to happen is you probably will not work as hard because you don't get to keep the results of your labor, your extra work. Okay. So what's going to happen is we're actually going to produce less in that system, learning, because we're talking about a class, because there's no incentive to work harder. If there's no incentive, there's nothing in it for you to work harder. You're not going to work harder. Once there's an incentive to work harder, you get something from working harder, you will work harder. So the problem with the system that I'm talking about here with the socialist type of theory of we'll take the extra from these people and give it to them is that if you don't keep any of the extra you work for or enough of it in your viewpoint, you don't have the incentive to work harder. So the incentive to profit, basically, what I'm telling you, the theory is essential to an economy working well. So, in other words, you want to be able to, if I work hard and I produce more and I earn more money, I feel like I should keep most of that for myself, right? Like I know that we got to give some in taxes to do certain things, and it's debatable how much, but in general, most people feel like that they worked hard, they should keep the results of that, right? So basically, my point is none of you want socialism to be true in my class, right? You want to get what you earned. And if you work hard, you don't want that to go to somebody who doesn't work hard. Okay. Now, why would you then want the economy to work differently? Because when you start having businesses to make money and you work the job that you got the education or training for, do you want that benefit to go to somebody who did not? Now, granted, we're not talking here about people, necessarily about people who are maybe disabled or unable to work or things like that or older. And so we're not talking about like not providing any sort of help or social programs or anything like that. I'm just talking about the theory of the more extreme versions of it, why most people, once they think about it, tend to be like, well, no, I would like to keep the income and the results of my hard work, right? So we're not talking about a bit of government control in the economy. We're talking more about full-on government control. So understand that I'm talking more of a moderate realm here, but you can at least see why if you put in full on, like, let's take from those who have a lot and give to those who don't, that would actually make people less likely to work hard, less production would occur, in this case, learning. And then there wouldn't be more to go around anyway, right? Because people would be learning or producing less, right? So that's kind of the theory from the classroom as it relates to capitalism and socialism. Okay. And I did actually put that on a quiz for this week, is to be able to think through that. I think I also put the dudes on the baseball game boxes on there too. All right. Now, so the US and originally, like when we're founded, was very, very capitalist, like pure capitalism, market economy. All right. So capitalism's over here, socialism, communism, command economy over here, government control, private ownership, individual decisions in the economy. We've tended over time in the United States to move more from over here to over here somewhere. Okay. So what we're going to talk about now is why. Okay. Why did we do that? All right. And I think there's good reasons why, and kind of shows you why when we're talking about economic theory, we're generally talking, most of us are talking about somewhere in here. Okay. We're not talking about on the extremes, really. Okay. All right. So here we go. So why did the U.S. become more of a mixed economy? All right. So full-on capitalism with no government regulation was leading to lots of problems. So that's what Marx and Engels were talking about. And they did have some points. Okay. So there's a lot of really unsafe production, unsafe working conditions, unstable economy, and financial situations. So I'm going to give you a few examples historically, for those of y'all that like history, right, that show why we had to move away from all the way market economy more towards a mixed economy. There's still more of a market economy or capitalist, but more of a mixture. Okay. So here's the first that I'm going to give. Meatpacking industry. So basically, this is a picture of, like, I think pigs right here. It's pretty gross looking if you look at it. So the food was being slaughtered in a way that was not safe. Okay, the meat was getting diseased and all this stuff, bacteria and all this, and it was spoiled by the time people could buy and eat it. And people were getting sick and people were dying. Okay, so there's this journalist called named Upton Sinclair, and he wrote this book about called The Jungle, about the meatpacking industry, that exposed this problem in 1905, which led the federal government under Theodore Roosevelt to pass laws requiring meat inspection and other safety measures in 1906. So this again is a good example of, like, a journalist who writes something showing, hey, this is a problem, this is not safe, we need the government to step in. So the government stepped in, set laws about inspecting meat, making sure it's safe, so forth and so on. So does that mean that we were moving slightly, ever so slightly, away from capitalism more towards the middle? Yeah, just a little bit. Every time it's one of these things comes in, it moves you that way just a little bit. Clearly that was needed. Okay. Like, you want to go to the grocery store and know that your meat is safe, right? It's been inspected. It's been handled with refrigeration. Of course, they didn't have refrigeration very well back then. They had to have blocks of ice, right? Another example of this. So 1911, there was this thing called the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. Okay. And that was like dresses or something. Okay. In New York City. So in this building right here, there was one elevator, very, early type of elevator. And they had the doors locked from the outside to the factory where they were working up here, because they didn't want people wasting time on breaks. Okay. So the fire starts and most of the people can't escape. And the poorer workers, like it's mostly, women and girls, jump to their death or they burn up in the fire. Right. So you got, I think it was a couple hundred people die in this, which just horrifies people. So the government passes laws soon after requiring safety in workplaces. And if you think about it now, how there's like always these fire escape. I don't know if you've been to, say, hotels and such, right? Where there's like this has to be this alternate exit that's marked, right? All the exit signs you see where that's telling you in case of a fire how to get out. Well, how do we get to that point? Disaster like this, right? So again, what's that doing? Well, it's more government regulation, clearly needed, right? Right, financial and economic stability issues. Okay, so after the stock market crash of 1929, a lot of people panicked, right? That's actually a technical economic term, a panic, right? Everybody runs to the bank, starts getting their money out. Okay. But I don't know if you're aware of how banks work, but they don't actually sit on your money. They loan your money out to other people to start businesses, build houses, etc. That's how they make money, is off the interest on that. Hopefully we'll get into some of that too. But the money's not all in the bank. It's loaned out for stuff. And so the bank couldn't give everybody their money when everybody runs in at the same time. So the bank closes. Well, the term for that is the bank went bankrupt. Bank's out of business. So now, imagine, say Joe over here, he goes and he realizes he's lost his money in the bank. Well, he's going to go to his friend Fred over in the next town and tell Fred, hey, you better go get your money out before the bank closes, right? More and more of this happens. More and more banks fail. People lose their money, right? This actually makes the Great Depression worse, right? So to prevent this, now the government has an insurance program for banks so that people will trust their money in banks. Okay, so hopefully your bank has this sort of insurance. It's called FDIC insured banks, and most banks are FDIC insured, right? And the idea is that you can trust that the bank has your money, because if the bank goes bankrupt, the government insures your money. That's why you can trust to put your money in a bank. So basically, if your bank failed, the government will insure you up to $250,000 per bank you have it in, which I'm guessing most of you don't have more than that in the bank anyway. I certainly don't. But the idea is the government has insured all that money of yours so you can get your money back if you had to, right? So that's, again, is government getting more involved in the economy, but in a way that I think everybody says needed to happen, all right, pretty much. All right, so that was kind of just a few examples showing you how over time the United States went more this direction, right? We started Social Security, we have other welfare programs. So that's why we're over here somewhere, okay? All right, now, on the other hand, the full command economy, socialist communist countries, they failed too. And let me give you a few examples of how socialist communist countries have failed. So, and China, when they became communist, from 1958 to 1962, Mao Zedong, who was a communist dictator, tried to do something called the Great Leap Forward. So basically, he said, well, we need to move from being an agricultural economy farming rice, we need to make steel. So he got millions of peasant workers out in the countryside to stop growing rice in their backyard and to build little steel mills in their backyard where they would make steel. Now, these workers did not make steel very well, so that was not a very big success, and they didn't have enough rice. So then, over the course of 5 years, the estimate we have now, it's a big estimate, but somewhere between 30 and 45 million people starved because of the government mismanagement of the economy here in a preventable famine. Okay, 30 to 45 million people. Okay, so look, this is where when we talk about, like, is there bad stuff in a capitalist economy? Yes. These things right here, bad. I don't want anybody to die, like, or something like that. But we're also talking about 30 to 45 million people here when run by a communist dictator. Okay, that's bad. That's worse. Okay, Ukraine under the Soviet Union, and you can see this is just in a nutshell one of the things that has to do with Ukraine and Russia. So the Soviet Union was communist. They were collectivizing agriculture, meaning the government was taking control of the farms and trying to control production and take all the grain production and control how it's distributed. And the peasants in Ukraine were like, no, this is our grain. You can't just take it all. It's not fair, right? Kind of like the cow and milk picture earlier. So Stalin, Joseph Stalin, who was the Soviet dictator, basically got his troops to surround the towns, burn all the food, and said, fine, if you won't play by our rules, we're going to destroy all your food. So basically, that led to a man-made famine that killed 7 to 10 million Ukrainians. About 20% of their population died from this famine enforced by a government-controlled economy. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably as many as people died in the Holocaust, right? That's how bad that was. And kind of an interesting historical point as to why, we don't talk that much about this one, right? Why people don't know that much about this one. Very interesting point. All right. Now, full government control is not working either. So, like Soviet Union, economy fell apart in the 1980s. North Korea today, when the government's controlled fully where production goes, they spend a lot on military while not spending enough on consumer needs like, food and clothing and shelter and things like that. So poverty goes way, way up, lots of hunger, need, and even starvation. So I do want to point out to you, it is not being unfair to point out the scale of the error when the government has complete control is way, way, way higher. Okay. So when government has complete control of the economy, it becomes very totalitarian, authoritarian, with this complete control, and you can't resist or else, right? They punish any dissent or disagreement very severely, as we saw in the case of Ukraine. Okay. So that's what happens when the government takes complete control of economies, and it really cracks down on any dissent. So there's problems with both ends of the spectrum. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at the kind of back at the continuum of economic systems and where I think our political parties really stand. This is kind of my opinion based on what I know of where they stand. Okay. So the progressive Democrats like Bernie Sanders and AOC and those guys, they call themselves Democratic Socialists. I would say they're actually kind of probably more like here ish. Okay, they're not really over here quite in like the Cuba range or anything like that. Okay, they're more in here. All right. Most Democrats are kind of here, and most Republicans are kind of here. So I wanted you to see here what I'm talking about is this is where most most Americans are kind of in this range right here. So, more over here. And then this is kind of like the edge, if that makes sense. Okay. And so that's kind of where I think most American people fall within that sort of range on our views. I just wanted you to kind of see how we end up there and why that's more of the reasonable range is somewhere in here. Okay. Um, so basically, in summing it up, almost everyone agrees that a modern economy has to be mixed, meaning a mixture of command and market elements. Some capitalism, some market economy over here, a little bit more, some government regulation, some elements of command economy, just not fully. Okay, so that's why we say it's mixed. Mixed economy, it's a mixture of the two sides. Okay. So the question really is how far to the one side or the other? How far, how much market, how much command, how far to one side of the continuum, how much on the other, how much government regulation are we going to have, how much economic freedom? That's really the question now. It's what realm in the mix area are we going to be? Okay. So here's what we got the rest of the week. This week, make sure you finish both the tutorials, there are two, and the two mastery quizzes, and the concepts from the tutorial and the live lessons. Make sure you got those down before taking the quiz Friday. It is going to require you to understand it more deeply. I think some of y'all have already found that out. And then I'm pulling the material both from the tutorials and from the live lessons. And if you've been here already, I already kind of gave you some hints as to some of the things that I know that I'm assessing on Friday. All right, so that is that. If you got any questions, you can stick around and ask them to me. And otherwise, we are done.